like we're all set here. Okay. Wow. Look at my webcam on YouTube. I'm massive. All right. So, good morning, everybody. Welcome to another Engineering the Markets. My name is Jared. It is Thursday, May 26th, 2022. So, happy Thursday to everyone. Hopefully, you've had a fantastic trading week so far. And let's take a look at where the market sits. So, yesterday, another relatively bullish overall session. Market headed a bit higher. We actually made a new weekly high on the weekly session. So we're slowly grinding our way back into some upper resistance points of the market. As you can see, the SPX does have its expected move still at about 40.26. So we're not quite home yet, but we are getting close to that upper bound. I would say that if you're targeting some relative price in the market, this would be a good area for the market to test. And as you can tell, we've had some tests of the upper bounds of expected move. They've simply led to larger sell swings. So it's not out of the question to think that we get another test like we did in previous weeks. But of course, look for that bearish reversal or some sort of confirmation of more selling to come. So let's shift over to our SPY. We got a little bit of that breakout look as well. You can see that our bearish channel is slowly starting to come undone. We have a little bit of a look above in the resistance point of this channel. You'll also notice that we are trading around that psychological 400. Not only is it psychological, it's also got a lot of volume profile weight to it. That's, of course, from a VPOC perspective. You'll notice that the S&P tends to have a large number of its transactions kind of centered around this price. One thing you can do is just kind of draw that center line around your VPOC and see what kind of interactions the market has. You'll notice it's not necessarily going to be sharp inflections. It's actually going to be a lot of chop. So you get sessions like this where you're going back and forth quite a bit. You'll get relatively flat trading sessions. And then, of course, if you're looking more from an overbought, oversold perspective, you get these moments in time where markets expand from value. They come back in, they try and expand higher. And of course, this is often on some Fed related information, whether it be the actual minutes and the press conference, or something as simple as a discussion from Federal Chair Jerome Powell. Now, the question is, we did have some of that FOMC minute release. This is from the previous meeting, and that did spark a bit of a rally yesterday. But as we've seen, these rallies have often been sold. So the question is, are we going to look to chop some more as per the VPOC thesis of volume profile? This is where markets like to transact, and transaction doesn't mean directionality. Or are we going to see a sharper sell swing, more akin to our resistance points in our channel? And that's where it's kind of a little bit of a question mark here, because if we look at where resistance was, we can kind of ask ourselves, why didn't we see the sell-off where we were supposed to? And this is kind of the thesis I had for the week. The idea that this bearish channel was clear, but it likely wasn't going to respond this week in the same way. So far, that is transpiring pretty well, and we'll look to see what the rest of the week has. Similar idea in the Nasdaq. So if I bring this down to a similar time frame, you'll notice that there are much more areas of transaction, larger shelves facilitated by pockets. These are lower liquidity zones that the market has fallen through and not necessarily transacted much at. So a move in the Nasdaq, especially a bullish move, would likely bring us to a higher transactional zone. And that, of course, would be, once again, another kind of psychological price, that 300. Not necessarily something I'm looking for this week, especially since we had a bit of a bearish reaction so far in a stock like NVIDIA. But the concept is the same. If you're looking at oversold and overbought markets from a volume profile perspective, you're often looking at where are value zones and how far extended are we getting from them. As long as you get some sort of signal to maybe go counter the move, you can actually play towards these value zones in short-term trade. So that's what our market looks like. Let's talk about NVIDIA really quickly. Did have earnings. As we discussed yesterday, about an $18 to $20 expected move. This did evolve over the session. So right now, looking at about a $20 expected move. You'll notice that the market did sell on the reaction, but so far has recovered a good portion of the move. And that is very often what you're going to see in earnings. Moves to the expected move and then trade that's kind of range bound or caught between the previous close and then, of course, the low of the expected move test. Sometimes you'll get some rare sort of counter moves, and that did happen on a stock like DKS yesterday. But once again, the stock was hitting its expected move, went a little bit further, and then, of course, had a very sharp reversal for the rest of the session. So NVIDIA, we'll look to see how that plays today. That is going to be definitely one to watch. And, overall, this would be a nice bolster for the market if this does have any rally behind it. But, push come to shove, we'd want to see how participants are trading after earnings. And also keep in mind that a lot of the higher open interest in NVIDIA sits on the call side. So it's not surprising to see maybe a move back into these areas, especially since it is drawing the price from a transactional value. The highest value actually sits at 190, which is pretty far away from the current price. But that would be an impressive test to actually get to those levels. Now, you compare that with a stock like Snow, which also had its earnings. And I just want to reiterate how important expected move is in this market. Stocks like Snow traded 132, 133 at close. We saw a drawdown in the earnings to about 110. So once again, about a $20 drawdown. And just notice what the expected move is, about 20 bucks. That can also be seen by just pricing those at the money calls and puts, which should have relatively accurate pricing from yesterday. A combination of those two brings you to about $20. Super important number to have for earnings. Pretty much all of the risk is defined around those levels. Additionally, some other names, Dollar Tree did come out. This one actually saw a sharp drawdown in regards to what happened with stocks like Target and Walmart. But as we can see, the earnings is showcasing maybe a bit of a stronger overall stance in its guidance and also its projections. Sharper drawdown, but already rallying up to, I believe, 155. So yeah, this stock definitely kind of coming back to previous price levels. You can even see that we're right back at where we collapsed from. So we basically filled our gap. That's a very important notation to keep in mind today. If the market is going to resist this gap down, then we can get a bit of a fade. But so far, the market is saying that this gap down was incorrect or inaccurate. So they have already finished filling up that area of the market. $15 expected move, 133 to 155. You calculate that. That's about, that's actually a little bit higher. That's about $20 of movement. So we are seeing a little bit of a bolster there. And last but not least, Macy's. There are a few more names like Baba, but just showing some of the retails in regards to Dollar Tree. So Macy's did get a bullish reaction, closing at 19, pricing at about 21.90, so 19.20, and then about a 270, 260 expected move, very much in line the expected move so far. So it's a good confirmation that expected move this week has been kind of the theme of a lot of our earnings. The only one that's standing out a bit right now is Baba. Baba really hasn't moved the full expected move yet on the reaction, nor in general after the reaction has been completed. So the range right now still has a little bit of opportunity to one direction. So, okay, so those are all of our earnings plays. One other thing I wanted to show, this is kind of becoming a point of conversation. You'll start to see that as markets change and people are looking for opportunity, they're putting together different thesis ideas as to how to time certain investments or basically look for inflections of the market. Everybody's going to kind of have their own spin on things, but it's good to know maybe some of the conversation around where the market has headed so far and what could be a possible signal. So the one that I've been seeing more frequently has been the ratio between the Nasdaq and the SPY. And what this is just a monthly chart of those two indices placed inside of a ratio. So you have QQQ over SPY. I've also gone ahead and made this a log chart. You'll see a lot of analysis of ratios done on a log scale just to kind of smooth out some of the percentage movement. So what you're seeing here is a relative trend line of this ratio that's been intact ever since the 2001 down correction in the market, basically the crash of the dot-com bubble. This relative low has had some pretty strong inflection in the market. You'll notice that there's maybe 5 to 6 touch points along the way. And then what you'll notice here is that we're actually looking at a monthly candle that's so far trading below that trend line. Now, obviously that can change in a hurry. That can obviously evolve with some sort of false look below. But this ratio says that oftentimes the Nasdaq does tend to lead in a bullish market. And obviously in the case of the current correction tends to lead on downdrafts as well. It tends to be one of the stronger indicators as to whether or not there's going to be strength, simply because technology is a heavy component of both of these indices. So one thing that you can be looking for is as far as whether this ratio becomes the theme for any sort of rally moving forward, or if it simply becomes a false signal for being a bull, basically to re-engage with technology companies. Another thing to remember with this ratio is just because you have a rising ratio doesn't necessarily mean you have a rising market. This is a ratio after the fact. So QQQ over SPY, and you have this ratio increasing, simply means that the QQQ is outperforming the SPY to some degree. Maybe the Qs are rising faster than the SPY, or in certain cases, you can have the SPY falling slower. You know, if they are both selling off and the SPY is moving slower, this ratio can be flat or sometimes moving up, depending on how disparate that movement is. So with ratio analysis, always be careful not to place directional bias around these inflection points. And obviously look at this holistically. We have gotten extended from our trend line similar to previous periods. And you may want to compare things like performance during these overextensions, along with when you get back to these levels, what does the actual movement of the market look like? So if you do, sort of indulge in this analysis and maybe take a look at how the market performs, keep in mind this is a monthly chart, It's not something for the short-term trade. And two, just because we're at a previous inflection doesn't mean it's going to work this time around. But it is important to kind of note, because we've just gotten there after a couple of months of underperformance of technology. So QQQ weakness has brought this ratio back down. So I thought that was kind of interesting, something to maybe look at in your free time. And as always, since it's Thursday, we'll go ahead and open it up to recommendations or just tickers that we want to look at. So I've had a couple kind of preloaded in the room, and then I'll look at some on YouTube. We have Splunk. So this is earnings. Relatively weak stock. We just want to call out how far the stock has come down. We've had about a 50% correction, 43, yeah, we'll call it 43% from a swing high. So this one has been sort of repriced with a lot of growth names. $93 close, 98 open right now, and a $12 expected move. Let's see how it moved into its earnings itself. Looks like we topped out at about 102. So, I'm looking at this and saying, okay, 93 close, 102 high side. Bit of a bullish reaction so far, which is good, but obviously we're kind of drawing back into that 100 print, and I'm not seeing a lot of sharp open interest out in the option market. So probably more of a balanced name. Obviously getting back above 100 would maybe be more bullish, but so far they've actually kind of rejected this upper candle top. So bit of a lower interest name. We haven't done anything really of technical importance either. We haven't broken a high or broken a low. We're still within our relative trading range. WSM. This is another earnings name, and this is an interesting one that was brought up in relation to some of the performance yesterday. So just to kind of note, it was a bullish day yesterday. Consumer discretionaries was a bullish sector. And if we're talking about the outperformer, discretionaries was the leader. So yesterday had a lot of bullish behavior in this area. And specifically, it had it in, I believe it's going to be probably your specialty retail, HD and low more specifically, and then I'm not sure, maybe like a distributor. These are your household durables. There are certain names that actually outperform the market really well. And here, I'm not 100% sure what's in all of these. But we were looking at a couple of those names earlier. This one fits. Very strong bullish day prior, before earnings. Or actually, no, wait, this came out with earnings here. Okay, yeah, so a bullish run into earnings and then a bullish reaction. That's actually pretty strong. You're not going to have a good option market here. Maybe you can look at this as kind of a idea of where the targets are going to be, but this is not going to give you a good expected move for the week. And therefore, you kind of have to play what's in front of you. We're already at 125, bit of a sharp rally into that. So you may want to see how we transact here for a bit. We're definitely trying to push against a pretty major sell swing that was broken. So interesting name, interesting performance yesterday. Might have already made the move, and we could maybe look for a fade first. Something as simple as back to like 120. So let's see, XOM and Oxy. These are all energy plays. I don't have any thoughts outside of they continue to be swing candidate, bull candidates for an uptrend. So, nothing has changed. There really should be no analysis outside of what's working continues to work. They have high correlation to crude. Crude is still rising. It's not rising as fast, but it's still rising. They have some correlation to natural gas. Natural gas made new swing highs. So there's really nothing there except for don't think much more than be a bull unless you reject. At that point, you can change your thesis short term. So let's see. Can you take a look at FB long term? Not necessarily Rimple, because what am I going to say? What's the long-term thesis here? How much is this stock worth? How much is this company worth from a stock market cap perspective? There's nothing on the chart that's going to tell you that. So long-term, there's no information here. Short-term, technicals, where are your levels and what is the trend? The trend right now is still down. Yes, it's holding, a lot of these relative prices. That's mostly because it's coming off of a crash. Until a catalyst comes, the stock is what I like to call dead money. There's little to move the stock outside of market movement. So you just look at it from that perspective. It crashed. It might be underpriced from a company perspective, but that doesn't mean it's going up. So let's see, missed the first half. Wondering if you have any thoughts on the video. Fortunately for you, you're on YouTube. You can back it up and then get all my thoughts in one nice package. Let's see, what's up with CRMT? Let's take a look. Looks like something's up. So they had earnings a couple of days ago. America's Car Mart. Definitely haven't heard of this one. Let's look at the options here. Might be a little bit of option dynamic going on. You'll notice not a lot of open interest down here. I'm wondering if these opened recently due to the speed of the movement. Everything down here is kind of light. It doesn't necessarily mean that happened, but it's just light price activity down here. And if I look at where it came from, it looks like a lot of shorts are starting to stop out because we have a very clear downtrend for a long time, weekly, daily, monthly, no matter what time frame, this is a downtrend. And all of a sudden you get a sharp spike, a little bit of an indecisive monthly. You never really know the speed of the move, but earnings looks like a catalyst. So I'd have to see what they mentioned. Looks like they beat on EPS, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're going up in this market. This was not a beat. This was not a beat. Yeah. So it's actually a pretty strong beat on the earnings reaction. So that might have been enough. Let's see. We looked at Bob already. Look into RH. So let's see. Restoration Hardware. This should be another one that got a little bit of a bid yesterday. So, when I look at something like a Williams-Sonoma, strong specialty retailer, these types of names are the ones you're probably familiar with. If you're a retail buyer, you maybe have heard of like West Elm, Pottery Barn, etc. And then you go to an RH and you see what they do. It looks like they have more of an online presence. A lot of online names here, some real estate development, and then of course, more detail about what they got their hands in. Not as strong of a bullish day yesterday. I mean, just looking at price is hard to tell, but it is up about 8% yesterday. So it's a small candle, but it's a strong day. Coming into its earnings, I would say a little overextended on its normal downtrend path. That doesn't mean it's ready to bounce, but we are getting that first, little signal of maybe a bullish engulfing after a small bottoming tail. Usually what I'll say is, does it correspond with an oversold on the weekly? Yeah, a little bit. And you can likely see on bounces retest. So just look at where you sold off on the weekly and think about if you do bounce, probably getting back into these areas. Now, that's what's going to matter though, earnings. If that doesn't happen before earnings, earnings will definitely be the problem with any sort of trade. So let's see. Could you please check now? NOW. So this is service now. Keep it on the weekly too. A lot of stocks are coming into their 200-day weekly. Dang it. 200 period weekly. Always say that. Your 200 period weekly is something to watch. You're getting some bottoming tails on the weekly. So obviously the stock is putting up some defense. It's not really selling off in the same fashion as other stocks. And that's evident by the chop on the daily. So looks like a strong day yesterday. And this is kind of where, you might want to be looking around as to what the market rewarded yesterday. So let's say the market is still bullish for a couple of days. Something that's a bit stronger yesterday might stand out. You maybe want to compare it with similar names. So we have like ServiceNow, we have something like a CRM, something like a, let's see. No, it's trying to remember my tickers. Yeah, I can't remember too many names actually. I'm kind of blanking. But start to do some analysis here. You have a strong day. You've run into the 20. So don't be surprised if that rejects initially. But you can start to watch it. If you start closing above the 20, it tells you that something's changing. I guess y'all are throwing up D-Dog as well as a possible kind of counter or similar name. Yeah, that one's probably a bit oversold as well. Keep in mind though, these oversold names, the ones that are maybe far from moving averages, probably look at larger time frame to see if there's any reason to think that they're going to bounce. Something like a D-Dog is coming into a swing low support, a weekly range support. It's getting close. Now what you're looking for is confirmation here. Do you get some sort of bullish reversal signal on the daily or weekly with volume to confirm? And that would at the very least give you a good risk to reward if the market bounces. Doesn't have to, but if. And last but not least, let's take a look at GME, which did have a strong session yesterday. Some news circulating about the borrow rates for this name actually increasing dramatically over the past couple days. That actually sparked a pretty nice rally in the stock. I think a lot of people made out like bandits in the chat room with some of the option plays. And as you can see, another bull flag right now breaking bullish. So, this name is certainly beaten up, but when it has its day, I think most traders recognize that the bullish days are the ones that come very quickly, but often can spark a couple of days of momentum. The right area as well for the reaction, along with coming into its earnings. So lots of catalysts here. Okay, with that said, my name is Jared. This is Engineering the Market. Trade safe. Stay tuned for pre-market prep. Have a lovely rest of the week, and we'll talk more next week.
Okay, good morning, everyone. If I've done this right,
Morning, Peter.
I think we're live. Good morning, Norm. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing today?
Well, I am doing great. All of you, of course, noticing I am not Carlos. You know what happens every time we go to Vancouver? Go visit the head office, have a little fun, some sort of weird EDM concertness happens, and
On a Wednesday night.
on a Wednesday night, I swear that Andrew puts these on purpose just to
I think
bring
so.
people to them.
It actually, before they even decided to do that, for sure, his flight was really early this morning. I met with Carlos and Andrew yesterday for a little while, and his flight was super early to this morning, and I just figured there was a chance. And he's had tech issues from up there a little bit this week anyway, so there was no reason. And then I asked, have you guys had some late nights because you've been getting up early, Carlos? He's like, no, the latest I've been back to my room is 9. I was like, well, obviously you have one night left. That's not going to stick for the entire trip. The experience that you've spoken about. So I was like, yeah, it's probably, do we need to cover you tomorrow? And so.
Oh, I have to share a screen in the room. Okay, now all of our friends in the chat room should see what everybody on YouTube also sees. Okay. Yes, and you're right. I'm amazed he got back to the room at 9. That's highly unusual. So.
Yeah. So.
Okay, well, so here we are. Thank you, Jared, for doing the engineering the markets. Helped set some good context for what's happening out there. I'm not sure if with the old market pulse activity, you got anything specific that you wanted to add overall, Norm, to what's happening in the world? Well, the financial world?
No, we just had jobless claims and continuing claims come out. The initial claims were a little bit lighter than expected. I think it was 210,000 versus 215. Continuing claims, nothing crazy. Hasn't affected the market much. We did get, I believe, a GDP revision this morning. That was GDP first quarter dropped a little bit more than expected. The original read was negative 1.3. The revised was negative 1.5. So I'm curious if we're already in a recession, Peter. Any thoughts? Are we going to get a negative GDP read this quarter?
I've been saying this the last couple of weeks because people keep asking. I honestly think that it's weakness on the forecasters' part that they'll only ever declare a recession after you're halfway through it, right?
After the fact.
Because you have to have dropped a certain amount before they're willing to declare it, which means that you're well into it by the time they officially declare it. So it's usually too late to do anything about it, especially if you're an individual investor. So my
just
view,
by the definition of it, you're over 6 months behind once it's called.
Right.
It's official. So,
right? Like it just seems ridiculous.
It's a little bit weird like that.
Yeah. So yes. I mean, the short answer is yeah. I think we're in one. Whether it's going to be, how much farther it has to go. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah. It's just weird. I hear the talking heads on business and finance shows, and they're like, might be in a recession by the end of the year. I'm like, huh? You're expecting positive GDP this quarter?
Exactly.
It's very odd. But anyway, I'm just on a tangent now.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's all right. That's what sometimes this is about. So why don't I go on a tangent too? Because you were mentioning some of the economic reports, and as everybody probably knows by now, there's some economic reports that have greater impact on the market than others. Norm was mentioning a few this morning. Probably not going to have a big impact. One thing that always does affect the market one way or the other is when we have the Fed speakers, especially like the Fed chair, or the release of notes, right? And yesterday we had the release of the Fed notes, And you can see right here, let me just circle it on the chart here, right here around 2 o'clock, right? 2 o'clock is when it released. The computers immediately read it, and you get this. I mean, this happened on almost every stock, right? You got this, what I called a heartbeat thing, where it popped up, it went down suddenly and violently, and then we...
Or a heart attack.
Heart attack, yeah. Well, at least it didn't flatline afterwards.
That's true.
But it's one of those things. Be aware, right? This is why we tell you about the different announcements and events that happen, because if you're in a trade and you're not expecting that, I mean, you could freak out. You could get stopped out unexpectedly. Like, as long as you're aware, you can better manage your situation. Did it have a huge impact? Well, over the long term, you would say not really, right? Because if I look at the chart for the day, it's sort of just a momentary, blip in the action. But if you were in something there, I mean, that could really cause you some cause for concern. So be aware when there's announcements coming, especially the Fed announcements, because it certainly can have an impact on the trades that you're taking. And I'm looking at the SPY here, but like I said, I can watch. I'll flip to Apple, right? Oops, if I can spell it correctly. Notice you have that exact same pattern, right? The same pattern appears on almost every chart at the same time, no matter what the stock was doing. Tesla. Oh my God, I can't get my computer running properly here. Can't get my fingers running. So Tesla had the same little blip. It's way up here in the chart, but and I can go on and on, right? AMD, etc. Like, they all showed that same activity, because when the computers, react, that's what you see, because so much of the market volume these days is computer traded. So just be aware of that. All right. So that being said, we do have some stuff happening for today. In fact, last night and this morning, we've already had quite a number of earnings, some of which are... Oh, what's happened? Some of which are appearing on our gappers list, and some of which are not. I have to reopen my... Gappers list. Open my desktop.
Yeah.
So here we go. We got our gappers up and down. And I just get it so hopefully you guys can see it. And let's take a look at what is moving this morning. So we're going to start with oddly, what's gapping up the most this morning with 327,000 shares traded, Dollar Tree.
You mentioned earnings. They had earnings this morning, along with Dollar General. I always think it's funny. They report at the same time almost every quarter, if not every quarter.
Yep.
Both up.
And they're not actually related. Like, they're totally different companies as far as I'm aware.
No, they're totally different companies with the exact same business model,
right?
Really.
Exactly.
A very similar one.
It's funny because I don't have Dollar Generals here in, or at least I don't think we do in Canada, but
Dollar Generals are very prominent in rural areas, especially in the South.
Well, and that's what I was going to say. As soon as if I drive across a small border crossing from Canada to the U.S., there seems to be a Dollar General right across the border.
Yeah. There's. I remember we saw so many. So when we drove to Gulf Shores for spring break, which was like a 10-hour trip, we realized how many Dollar Generals there were, and they're very notable with their black and yellow signs. Mm-hmm. We like every corner we turned, there was a Dollar General. So to keep my son entertained, we actually counted how many Dollar Generals we could see, and there were like 28 of them. Yeah. It was ridiculous.
Okay, well, there you go. I got a booming business, apparently. So they reported, it looks like they both had relatively good earnings. We're seeing them both gap up this morning. Dollar General is a NYSE stock, and Dollar Tree, DLTR, is a Nasdaq stock. I generally, if I had to pick one, I would go with the one trading on the Nasdaq, just because the price action I find tends to be a little smoother and easier if you're trying to day trade. But they both look okay so far. Both have about 168,000 shares in Dollar General, 300,000 on Dollar Tree. So we'll keep him here to set some.
I was going to say your Nasdaq. I would stick with your Nasdaq because it's got more shares traded, more liquidity, bigger gap. So your Dollar Tree, I like I prefer over the other, but two different companies could move completely differently. You never know.
Yep. There you go. Macy's also is on our list this morning. It only ever shows up on our list. Well, I shouldn't say that. I remember one time when they were spinning off their digital offerings and they showed up. But other than that, must be earnings.
It is earnings, and the biggest thing here, and we know we've been talking about this, that retail overall has been pretty negative. There's been a couple of outliers. Macy's actually raised their guidance for the remainder of the year.
Which is interesting that the last couple of earnings reports we've had from the sort of the retail sector seem to have been generally positive. So it seems like we saved the best for last this earnings season.
It kind of makes sense. It was the stay-at-home stuff. Like Lowe's got hammered. I think Home Depot, if I remember correctly, was pretty decent, but they ended up giving it back pretty fast. Off the top of my head, I haven't looked at them in a couple of days. So that's that kind of stuff. The retail, Bed Bath Beyond kind of things, Best Buy, those kind of got hit. These guys were their clothing people to go back to work. Not all, but Nordstrom did pretty well, if I remember, a couple days ago. So
yeah, you're right. JW and Nordstrom's. There you go. So
get your ass back in the office. Oh, I need some clothes.
Go buy some. That's right, with a slightly larger waistband, probably. Anyways, all right. So we'll keep Macy's on the list. It really hasn't done much pre-market, so it did jump up. You can see it had a big move early this morning, but then it's largely been moving flat. It's also a NYSE stock, which, again, I just generally are a little more tentative, I guess, on trading those, because I find that, there's just more involvement from the market maker, which means stranger things happen. I find it more difficult to day trade. But we'll keep it here and we'll set some levels. RDBX is the next one I see on our list here. Redbox Enterprise. Oh, this is the movies out of a machine. Is that it?
Kiosk, yeah. Yeah, I mean, they're trying to redo their business. They had news a couple of days ago that they acquired some rights to a movie. I don't know if they're producing that. So I haven't really touched this one. It's been a little weird to me. It's a lower float. I think it's a little bit of a meme.
Sounds like they're trying to do a Me Too thing following Netflix's example. Is that what's going on here? Produce their own movie. Okay, well, we'll see how that goes for them. Price action pre-market, not bad. Volume is still under 1 million shares, so it's only okay. I'll leave it here again so we can take a look at it a little later. Twitter's the next one. I see in the list. It's funny. I was watching Twitter, hoping to get some movement on it yesterday, and it did nothing. However, today we seem to see it moving up a little bit. It's still, back at the levels it was pre-Elon, if you want to put it that way, back before all the excitement happened with his purchase or acquisition, the $44 billion acquisition, which has him significantly underwater, because I think that was priced around $54, and we're sitting at 38 right now.
54.20.
Yeah, exactly, 54.20. That's right. But I don't know. Is there any new news, or is this just regular Twitter?
I don't see anything crazy, and frankly, I won't even look at Twitter unless there's major news of some change in that deal.
Fair enough. All right. So moving on then, Baba. Baba did have earnings. Because I did look them up.
Yeah, and they were very vague and gave no guidance.
It's funny. I noticed that Baba, and there's another one that's not on our list, Baidu, that also had earnings, and I noticed that they seem to be avoiding guidance. It's sort of I think it might be a smart move on their part, because guidance tends to sink things. And we'll talk about that in a second with a company that had good earnings but bad guidance, and of course they dropped.
Pretty heavy volume this morning. Should be pretty good, I expect.
Yeah, 2 million shares. Bubba tends to move when it chooses to. All right, next on the list, PDD. I did not look them up, so I don't know what the story is with PDD. Only 200,000 shares though.
I don't know. They report tomorrow morning. I think this might be moving with Baba. That's the only thing I can think of.
Oh, so they haven't even reported yet. Yeah, pre-market action doesn't
No.
actually look that good on them. So you know what? This is gonna be the first one. I'm just gonna get rid of it because it doesn't look like it's doing much. Whoops. NCLH and CCL, I noticed, are on the list here. So there's something happening in the cruise line sector.
I couldn't find anything.
Yeah,
too
I didn't see
crazy,
anything
man.
either.
Maybe somebody else can throw it out there. The one thing I did see is Southwest Airlines Love. They updated guidance and said their sales are going to be up 12 to 15% from 2019, and they expect good profits this quarter. I don't know if that's just buoying the travel sector or there's something specific to these guys that I missed, but
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't see anything either in a quick scan this morning. So I don't know what to do with these, honestly, because maybe we'll set some levels. I'll leave them on here for now if we want to set some levels. But otherwise, they may just be ones that we choose to push aside. All right. What else we got on the gap up list? Tesla. Oh my goodness, Tesla. $672. How the mighty have fallen. 600,000 shares traded this morning. Yeah, looks normal for Tesla, sort of pre-market. We got some movement. But unless you tell me there's great news, it's just...
no, I think this just kind of goes with the Twitter deal. I do see that it says Elon is going to get a little more cash together, and then it maybe rely less on margin loans from Tesla. So that's probably what's doing it.
Okay. Elon playing with his money. Whatever. Okay, so let's look at the gap down list. We've got a few here on the gap down list, starting with NTNX, Nutanix. I think did they have earnings last night?
Yeah, they reported last night. We're going to have to go through the downside a little bit quicker because we're running behind a bit here. But yes, they reported last night.
Okay, so they're looking good. With some good volume. Another one that I do remember was on the list for reporting was Snowflake. What a pretty snowflake. So they're gapping down 11%.
Yeah, they reported last night.
Okay.
Yeah, they're primarily they beat on earnings and revenues, I believe, but their forward guidance was concerning, seeing some sales slowing down in the future.
Some headwinds. Okay, well, there you go. So there's Snow also looking okay. KHC on the list. Down, what are they down so far this morning? 4.7%. Low volume, though. Only 250,000 shares. I don't know. Looks okay, but not great.
I got to tell you, this is another one, man. This is a pretty decent move, and I haven't seen I guess they got a downgrade this morning, but other than that, I haven't seen a whole lot.
Yeah, downgrade wouldn't normally affect a company of this size so significantly, but I suppose it could. Somebody thinks they know something. And then the one that I definitely wanted to talk about was NVIDIA. So that everybody was looking for earnings last night in NVIDIA, and they gave us earnings and a forecast.
Yep, indeed. They did finally show up. They weren't on the gappers list earlier, or I guess they were. I missed it, but yep, absolutely had earnings last night.
Yeah, so they actually beat their numbers, but gave a pretty low forward guidance, which is why they're gapping down. So, like I said, maybe the Bubbas and the Baidus have the right idea. They just won't tell you what their guidance is, and maybe they can keep their stock propped up for a little while longer. So despite the fact that we're down almost 4%, over 2 million shares traded, so some big volume today, the price action this morning has sort of been in an upward direction. So it might be worth keeping an eye on NVIDIA to see what it chooses to do today. Last couple of things we have on the list here. We've got Coin, Mara, and Z. I'm just going to we'll look at Coin, I guess.
Bitcoin's down 3%, 3.1% currently, just under 29,000. So more turbulence in crypto.
Yeah, well, I'm not surprised there, but there you go. So, all right, so we'll leave Coin. We got a bunch of stuff now we can check levels on. I'm going to do a quick run through of them again as we get to that point of the show, and we'll figure out which ones might make the best targets. All right, so let's go to our announcements with that, and we'll let you know what's happening. On the announcements, I'm just going to pull up our web page, because on our web page is where we will tell you everything that's happening, and you can go there and find a full slate of activities, which Norm is going to tell us.
Yeah, can you mind pulling that little montage off or to the side a little bit, Peter? But yeah, if you go to bearbulltraders.com, that nav bar at the top, all you got to do is click webinars. You'll go to this page. Just a reminder, every Monday night, we've got the onboarding, except for next Monday because it's a holiday. Got a few holidays coming up. I can't wait. But let's see here. So I believe he'll be doing it Tuesday. We'll have to confirm with him. I think he'll be back tomorrow morning. So Carlos does that every Monday, available to all membership classes, even for the trial. And then immediately following that is Tech, which next week will be Kyle starting his 2-part book map series. That'll be at 8 p.m. Eastern. Strategy next week is Eamon with trend trading. And the following week, my good friend over there, Peter, talking about the Rising Devil and Fallen Angel trades. Those are on Tuesday. Note Eamon's special time of 5 p.m. next week. Then on Wednesday, Psychology, next week's Dr. Reed, talking about will I ever get there as far as trader development. Very interesting discussion, 8 p.m. Eastern, and then we'll have Creative back the following week, The Art of Setting Goals. Thursday is Mentorship at 11 a.m. with John, 4 or 4:30 with Ed. Usually he takes some trades right after the bell at 4 in the room and then starts his mentorship session at 4:30. 8 p.m. Eastern, you've got Thor. Don't forget about tradingsimulator.com, our free web-based trading simulator. Just go to tradingsimulator.com and that's Trading Terminal. But you can also get there from Trading Terminal. It's actually on the nav bar on the left now, so you can just click that.
Well, let's do that.
Trading Terminal. Yeah, there you go.
That's. Oh my good Lord.
Yeah, okay, Boomer.
No, it was working so well for me for a second. So
yeah, right there, simulator on the left. And just for the record, Peter's only about 7 years older than me.
Only about like 800. Sure. Oh, it doesn't even have my account in here. Anyways, I'm not going to show you my account information. But you can
maybe it's because you went through that way. But yeah, you can log in. It'll send you a couple of homework assignments a week, which you can opt out of if you don't want. But they're very helpful in pointing you in the right direction of what times and tickers to look at. So yeah. There you go.
Indeed.
Rafzilla, I'm not even 43, brother. I'm older than that. But thank you. What was I? There was. Oh, if you're watching on YouTube, haven't been in the chat, use the promo code PreMarket24 when you sign up for the intro membership. Get you a discount off that 7 calendar day trial. Yeah. That's all I got, brother.
Okay. Thank you. We're all right. Apparently, I'll get my fingers working only a little bit later this morning. Okay, so let's go through and take a look at some levels because we got a bunch of stuff that we called up off of the gap up and gap down list. And I'll quickly go through and tell you what levels I see on them. Feel free, of course, to set your own. On some of these stocks, I may not see much, so we won't set much. We'll see if you can follow along. Let's start with Dollar Tree. Dollar Tree, we're moving up through this gap. So definitely, whenever there's a gap on the chart, I'm always going to watch that carefully. So the low end of this gap is sitting right here around $155. So 155.11 is the low of that candle, 155.05 this one. So I think I usually like a little bit of advance notice. So I'm going to put my level at 155, and we could easily get to that right off the open because we're sitting at 153 now. So I'll watch that. On the downside here, the high of the low end of the gap, 144.77. So I'm going to put a marker right there in case we do drop. I can keep an eye on this zone. Outside of that, if we even go higher, I'm going to drop a level up here. I like 161. I don't know that we're going to move that much, but you never know. That's probably about it for Dollar Tree. Dollar General, like we mentioned, is probably the one I would watch. I wouldn't watch it compared to Dollar Tree, but if you're interested, it's a similar situation. Same gap, we're in the gap. Watch the low end of the gap and the high end of that gap, and that'll give you some indication as to where we might see some support and or resistance. So I will mark those up above it. Sort of see a level where we hit and bounced off of back in March of this year, around 230. So that will be good for Dollar General. Macy's is one that tends to move. Let me clear all of my previous levels so we can look at this. So we've moved up through what had been a gap. You may be able to see down here back earlier in May. We're now into an area where, well, if we fall a little bit from this at the open, I'm going to watch for some support around 2140. That looks like a good area to see if the price gets supported if we move down into it pre-market or as the market opens. If we go up, well, we've got some room to the top side. I see areas where there was actually support where Macy's bounced off of in many months previously. Notice all these candles ending roughly the same area around here. So 2250 seems to be an area that you can keep an eye on. I've got a marker 2245 just because we bounced off of that in January and again in February and again in April. So certainly I'll keep an eye on that. If we move outside of that range, I will come back and reassess. Redbox Entertainment, like we mentioned, is gapping here this morning. Well, interesting here on the upside. It's been not moving a lot if I'm looking at the daily chart over the last little while. So we only have some recent levels. Look at this one-day spike that happened all the way up to $11 exactly. So that tells me that that's a place to watch. We're at 742 though. It seems like that would be quite a move to get there. I'm not sure that it's going to do that today, but we are in a good uptrend. I will watch where this opened. So this opened at the close, $8.53. So I'll put a marker there because that might be an area where we see some resistance when it moves up. So I'll keep an eye on that on Redbox. Twitter, as I said, I was looking for levels on Twitter. I'm going to clear what I have here in my chart. We're still sitting at sort of relatively low area. So the levels I would put on here are 40.96, just because this is the start of a gap that we had back over in April. I mean, I don't think we're going to get to the top end of this gap, but just in case we go crazy today, 43.33 is where the low of this candle is. So I'm going to put a level there to mark to see what happens. I don't know that we're actually going to get huge movement in Twitter today, unless, and here's the big unless, right? Elon decides to tweet something. That could be what moves it. Other than that, Twitter's most certainly going on a secondary list for me. Baba, we mentioned, had earnings. It's moving up a little bit on relatively good earnings with no forward guidance. I'm going to mark an area up here around 94.40. That looks like a good area to keep an eye on. And then we have the high and lows of the previous 2 days on the downside for me to pay attention to. So he said we're not quite sure why CCL or NCLH are moving, but they are gapping up a little bit. I don't see actually much happening here. Highs and lows of the previous 2 days actually bracket the current price, you can see. So I think I'm going to leave that for NCLH, and CCL, yeah, much the same. So you know what? These are not even going to go on my watch list unless we see some specific price action, right? Unless something happens after the open or there's news, then of course I can always bring them back. Tesla, for me, is much the same story. We got the highs and lows of the previous 2 days. We're moving to the top end of that range, but in what has been a 2-month downturn. So, I don't see much big happening on Tesla today. I do notice we've got what I like to call the tinfoil candle happening here. So this is right at 8 o'clock. Sometimes you see an account settlement line, big volume. See this big volume candle? And then we get a small body, big wick candle where the price just moves between the range in which these accounts are being settled. So I've just put a marker. You notice I use a different color. It's yellow, but shows up better on my black charts, not so much on the white ones. But just so I can see where that is, because sometimes that proves to be an area of support or resistance. So like Tesla, look already, see how that settlement happened at 8 o'clock, but earlier this morning at 7:30, and then later again just before 9, we sort of bounced off that area at a high. So I will keep an eye on that. But otherwise, Tesla's sort of always on a watch list, but it's not going to be an active on my active watch list for today. NTNX is a start of the ones that were gapping down. We're well below the recent price action, so I don't have any immediate levels. Let's go back in time here and see what we've got. We have to go all the way back to February of 2020 for when we were this low, and in that case, the low here in this candle was $11.31. So I'll put a level there to see if that is of interest. And then back here in, when is this? This is August of 2019. We had a previous low of 1774. So I'm gonna put a level here at 1774. I don't know that we're gonna pop up to get there, but being that we've gapped down through that, it is possible. So we'll see what happens on NTNX. Snow, 755,000 shares, so it doesn't look bad. It's certainly been declining. Let me look at a daily chart here. Over the last little while, again, puts us well below all the recent price action. Looks like for Snow, I've got to go back. I've got no more data. So this looks like we're at all-time lows from what I can tell from my chart. So I really have no levels to set. I mean, we've got the low of the previous 2 days, or the lows, for me to keep an eye on, but we are below that. So it looks like we are gapping, though, below the IPO price, which would have this thing looked like it IPO'd back in 2020, because my chart only goes back that far. So, hey, that can actually be interesting when we're at all-time lows. People tend to react at that, so we'll see what happens. KHC, not a great mover, not one of my favorite. It doesn't look good pre-market. If you want some levels, you notice I already have some set on my chart. I'm going to leave those. 33.36 looks good. We have a more recent level, maybe around here at 36.25. Don't love it, but it may be a place for support. I'm not going to watch KHC actually again, unless it does something exciting and jumps back up on one of my scanners. NVIDIA can always be interesting. Like we mentioned, earnings with a negative forward guidance. So we're seeing it move down here. Definitely have levels to set on this. I'm going to set something way down here at 135 just in case it gets that low. What else have we got here? If I look at the daily, there was a lot of shares that transacted over a long period of time in a narrow range between 124 and about 140, 150, I would say. So if we get down below to the 150 area, I would expect to see a lot of support there for the price. So I'm going to set a level at, what is the high of these candles? 146, 140. 147. Yeah, I'm going to set this at 147, so that way if we get anywhere near there, I'll know to keep an eye on NVIDIA. I certainly hope we don't drop, because my favorite AMD will get dragged down with it. Coin, like we mentioned, a little bit of movement in the cryptocurrency space. I don't really see it doing anything interesting so far this morning. This would be another one that only if it jumps up on the gappers would I keep an eye on. So that's that for this morning. Yeah, we are looking good here. Just looking to see if I have any of our moderators with their list. I think I sped up too much. Now we're ahead of schedule. So for me, the one I'll bring up, that because I always look at it, AMD, I don't expect it to be doing much pre-market. It actually has a little more volume than normal. We're almost at 1 million shares. That's not super high, but it is interesting for AMD. It's, I'm sure, just moving in sympathy with NVIDIA. It is gapping down a little less than 1%. I find a trade on AMD every day, but that's just me, because that's, you know, sort of what I watch and how I watch the market. So I'm going to keep an eye on AMD. You notice I already have some levels on my chart: $88.30, $84, right? Areas to watch if we move down. The highs and lows of the previous 2 days bracket the current price. You know, I don't expect huge movement on AMD today because it doesn't really have its own catalyst, but you never know. That's why I watch, because you never know. Why don't I take a look quickly at our friends at YouTube? See, do you have anything that you guys are watching that we should take a look at? First thing I see here is somebody's talking about EMC/GME, and good for you for keeping those together. They do tend to move in tandem. AMC, you know, 1 million shares, up 1.3%. GME, less than 100,000 shares, but up 1.1%. But you know, this looks pretty normal for AMC, right? They're still getting volume. 1 million shares pre-market is not unusual for it. Nothing big happening. Jared's sort of the expert on this one. I find AMC, it's weird to trade these days, but if you know what you're doing, I guess you could take advantage of it. Down at $12, I would argue that's sort of back where it's supposed to be, but anyways, you know, it might move today, it might not. Zoom. Mohammed is looking at Zoom. Let's take a look at Zoom. I haven't looked at Zoom in a long time. Zoom is down in a range. It's settled in around $100 here. Probably disappointed because I canceled my account. I got an email from the CEO saying how disappointed he was I canceled my account. I felt so special. I didn't change my decision though. So obviously they're looking to try and retain business. Zoom, not a lot of volume today, only 42,000 shares, you know, only marginally down. So you know, if this moves, it might pop up on our chart. A daily basis is, I find it hard to trade Zoom recently. The volume just hasn't been there to make it a good day trader. So Jonathan, layoffs. Not layoffs, I'm just filling in. And I'm excited. That's why I'm moving fast. All right, what else are you guys talking about? I see people mentioning tickers. Dollar Tree, we already looked at those. Gary L, yeah, Zoom didn't. I don't think they offered me any discounts. They just said, "Come back," and I said, "No, thanks." And then I think I am dead to them. Target, TGT. Target here is well, not doing much. You know, you're asking what about a continuation, Doug S. I mean, I see nothing so far pre-market to let me think this is going to be in play today. You know, it could very well move. I've got some levels that were on here from previous you know, days looking at it, but I don't see anything particularly that tells me Target's going to have a strong day today. So so with that, I think for my list here, I am going to I'm going to keep an eye on AMD. I'm definitely going to look at DLTR because it is moving well. You know, it may or may not amount to something, but I'll keep an eye on it. Macy's, you know, sometimes surprises me. And I have to admit, I've had some good trades on Macy's, so that colors my judgment to say, you know, I like it just because I've had some success with it. So I'm going to keep an eye on Macy's. And the last probably will be Bubba is the other one, Bubba, that I want to put on my list. So other than, I'm assuming, of course, that when I watch AMD, I am always also watching NVIDIA. So those are on my list. So that makes up sort of my 6 for today. So AMD, NVIDIA, Dollar Tree, Macy's, Bubba. So that's what I'll keep a look at. All right. With that, let's see. I'll bring in for you guys here our moderators list, or at least those that have it. One thing that I do every morning in the room, and I haven't posted it yet, I look at the IPOs and let you know when IPOs are opening. It's been a strange market for IPOs. The example would be the only thing on the list this morning when I was looking earlier today was SVRE, which is a potential IPO. But they have been just moving the date by 1 day for a week and a half now. I think I first put it on the list about, early last week. And every day they move it by 1 day, which is not typical, except recently when they keep moving IPO days. So, there's not a lot of stuff IPOing. I guess I can't blame them, right? Nobody really wants to IPO in a big down market, and therefore they keep pushing the offerings that are imminent. So I think we're going to see continued weakness and downturn on the IPOs for the next little while. All right, so our other moderators, Tiffany was in first, and thank you for that, Tiffany. She's going to be watching NVIDIA, Tesla, and Snowflake. With the secondary list of BA, and Dollar Tree. Dima is going to be watching Twitter, Baba, AMD. Good for you, Dima. And Apple. Thor is going to be watching Apple as well, Baba, and the SPY overall. The secondary is going to be watching PivotBot, which is on Twitter. He's got a PivotBot feed that gives you alerts for when something is hitting the CAM pivot levels. It's actually quite interesting. I usually put it on my phone and just look and see what it announces. Thor seems to get a trade almost every day off of it, so it's well worth watching if you're interested. Mike B is going to be watching NVIDIA, Apple, and Baba. And he's got a ton going on, so he's probably not going to be trading in the morning. All right. Susan is going to be watching Dollar Tree and Tesla with a secondary list of Target and Home Depot. Oh, so she's sticking to the retail. And Megan's just coming in with Dollar Tree, Macy's, and Facebook. Okay, well, so we got a lot of stuff being watched. It's, I think it's going to be a pretty good day. But, whether we have a big list or a tiny list, I find there's always things to trade. As long as you just wait for your setup, be patient, and don't force your trades, you could probably have a good day on the markets. So with that, I hope you have a fantastic day. Thank you, Norm, for letting me sit in for Carlos with you this morning. And we are going to go live with our opening bell crew with Andrew and Brian. They will be on momentarily. So with that, for all our friends on YouTube, hopefully you'll join us in the room. We do have, always use the code PreMarket24 to get that 1 week $24 trial. Just test it out. See if it's for you. It's a great environment for trading with some fantastic people to trade with and talk with. And, when the trading gets slow in the afternoons, we will talk about all sorts of things. But we primarily focus on our trading. We always live trade and tell you what we're doing and, share information. And that is obviously the most valuable part of what we do. So with that, have a great morning, everybody. And we'll see if I'm with you tomorrow morning or you've got Carlos. I don't even know. So take care, everybody. Okay, I think we're off the air for YouTube. Sarif, I saw you asking. Sorry, I was in my little, my wrap up there. I saw you asking though about the Benzinga, the Benzinga, feed. I guess the news feed that we had. So you're right. We have moved it to the trading terminal, and we're looking to try and integrate everything there. So that's sort of the direction that we're going. I know that you don't get the news immediately like you did, although you can absolutely get the live squawk that's in there. If you've got feedback, because I know it doesn't look exactly like it did, feel free to send it to us. You can send it to any moderator or directly to Andrew. Andrew's gathering that and really looking at how to improve it. We certainly have received the feedback from you and others that you want sort of that quick hit list of news articles as they're as they're moving. So that's something that we're looking to put into our development. Because we want the trading terminal to be the one-stop shop for all the information you've got in the market, and use it the way we look for data. So I know that I've provided feedback that Andrew's given to the development team that they've incorporated, as have most of the moderators. So don't be afraid to send in that feedback. If you've noticed something that's either not working the way you want, or you've got a suggestion of, hey, I'd like to see some different set of data, or the same data that you've got but displayed differently. So we'll keep working on improving that, and appreciate the fact that you guys are engaged.